While I was listening to this story and preparing this video, I felt a bit of fear, panic, and sadness at the same time for the owner of this story. It felt as if it was happening right in front of me. Therefore, if you have a weak heart, I advise you to leave because it's a story based on reality. But if you're brave, put on your headphones and let's embark on the journey of this story. "24-year-old Patrick moved to the city to live there and rented a simple apartment on the 7th floor of one of the buildings located in that city. He also got a job in one of the large malls in the city. He decided to live in the city, where he began to establish his life, shape himself, and earn money in order to have a happy life like other people. Everything was going well in Patrick's life after a few days of his stay in the city. He would go early in the morning to his job and return home in the evening after a long day full of events and interactions with colleagues and customers. He got to know his colleagues at work and became well respected and appreciated by them, as well as some customers who frequented the mall. One day and one night, every detail of Patrick's life changed in his view and concept of life. As Patrick was sitting on his bed and watching one of his favorite movies on TV, he began to hear loud and strange music whose source he did not know, and he was not used to hearing it at that time. He looked at the time. It was 10 o'clock in the evening. Patrick was amazed by the situation and began to search for the source of that music. He discovered that it was coming from the 8th floor of the building in which he lived. At first, Patrick didn't care much about it and thought a neighbor was listening to music. But the annoying sound persisted every time he thought it would end. Patrick went into his room to sleep on his bed, and it was almost 12 o'clock. He started to get annoyed because the annoying music didn't stop for more than 2 hours. Patrick tried to sleep, hoping that it would eventually stop, but the music continued to disturb him. That night, he couldn't sleep. The next day, Patrick's day went on as normal at his job. He came home, completed his tasks, and spent time on his phone and watching TV until the music he heard the night before started again. He looked at the time. It was 10 p.m., the same time he started hearing the annoying music the previous night, but this time it was accompanied by sounds of dancing and thumping coming from the floor above his apartment. Patrick couldn't bear it anymore and called the owner of the apartment to complain about the noise. To his shock, the owner told Patrick that the apartment above him on the 8th floor was unoccupied and had been deserted since the old woman who used to live there passed away. Patrick checked the source of the sound and confirmed that it was coming from that apartment. The next day, after another night similar to the one before, the owner of the apartment came and accompanied Patrick upstairs to the empty apartment. The owner assured Patrick that there was no one in that apartment. Patrick looked around and noticed that everything was covered in dust, and he noticed that there was a picture hanging on one of the walls and asked about it. So the owner of the house replied that it was the picture of the old woman who used to live in it. The owner of the house went away and didn't understand anything about the music. After assuring Patrick that there was no one in the house. At the same time, 10 in the evening, the cursed music started, but Patrick was waiting for it. He expected it to start at the same time, as if he was used to hearing it. But the strange thing is why the music starts exactly at 10. Patrick began to complain and thought of going up to the apartment and knocking on the door, but he entered it and made sure that there was no one there. Patrick called a friend and told him the story. So his friend got up and jokingly told him that they could be ghosts and laughed sarcastically. But they didn't reach a conclusion. Patrick went to sleep as if he was used to the annoying sound, and the unexpected happened when Patrick woke up to the sound of knocking on his door at 3 o'clock after midnight. The sound of knocking on the door was strong, but no one responded. Patrick looked through the peephole, but he didn't see anyone. Patrick went back to his room but noticed something strange. The door to his room was closed, although he had left it moments ago and didn't close it. It was just wrong. Patrick thought he had locked it when he left, and the moment Patrick entered the room, he noticed frightening eyes at the window. He went to his bed, but his heart was beating quickly after being terrified by the situation that had occurred. He began to wonder if he might have knocked on the door of a haunted house. Time passed, and he started asking who was behind the door. He was afraid and couldn't open the door. But he gathered courage and opened the door to see who might be there. He started to wonder if it was a thief or something, but thieves don't knock on house doors. When he opened the door, there was no one there, but he was afraid. When he went to close the door, he heard a laugh that made his blood freeze in his veins. His spine was tingling with fear. The door quickly closed, and terror overcame him. His heart was pounding as if he had fallen down 100 floors. Patrick quickly went to his room, and the door to the room was also closed. He entered while feeling afraid and not knowing what to do. It was as if he wanted to cry from the fear he felt. His eyes came to the window. Oh my God, it was open and the curtains were moving. He no longer knew what to do. He froze in place, and he knew that his night would not end well, and at a moment when Patrick almost passed out, he heard a sharp and terrifying sound along with a laugh that made Patrick scream. She laughed and got angry, saying, "You are the cursed boy who is annoyed by the sound of the music that was at my wedding party. You will hear it forever." The music started playing, and Patrick began to hear it again. Patrick cursed the music and the 8th floor. Patrick instantly started uttering words he himself did not understand. He fell to the ground, passed out, and no longer felt anything. The next day, Patrick woke up and started looking around. He found himself asleep on the floor. It was 9 o'clock in the morning, and he was late for work. He remembered what happened to him the previous night. Patrick called the owner of the house, but there was no answer. It seemed like the phone was switched off, and he didn't know what to do. He remembered his friend and called him, telling him what had happened to him. His friend calmed him down and said, "I will come to your house after I finish work." Patrick got up and washed his face. He looked at himself in the mirror and saw terror in his eyes. He felt exhausted and tired. His face was pale, burdened with troubles and sorrows. He felt panic and couldn't bear to look any longer. He wanted things to go back to the way they were. At the end of the day, around 6 o'clock in the evening, Patrick's friend arrived to support him and find a solution to what had happened. He reassured his friend and promised to stand by him no matter the consequences. They decided that Patrick's friend would spend the night with him and face the unknown together. Patrick's friend had knowledge of such stories and had encountered people who had experienced similar things. He was confident that he could help his frightened and frustrated friend. He suggested that Patrick call the owner of the house again. When Patrick made the call, he summarized what had happened to him. The owner of the house thought that Patrick was suffering from some sort of disorder, but he agreed to come to the apartment. The owner of the house arrived, and Patrick introduced his friend to him. Patrick's friend began asking questions to the owner of the house. He asked about the woman who used to live upstairs, and the answers shocked them. The owner of the house considered her to be normal. He shared that this woman had spent 33 years in that house. Her story was tragic. On her wedding night, after the ceremony had taken place, a call came from the groom's family. The groom, who was supposed to marry the woman, had a fatal car accident while on his way to the wedding. The woman decided to spend her life without marrying anyone else and remained in the same state for 33 years until she passed away. At this point, Patrick and his friend realized that there was a connection between this woman's story and what had happened to Patrick the previous day. The owner of the house left, and Patrick and his friend remained deep in thought about what the owner had revealed. They waited until 10 o'clock, and Patrick was terrified during that time. However, his friend reassured him, saying that he was by his side and that things would be fine. When the clock struck 10, the music didn't start. Patrick and his friend were surprised, and Patrick began swearing to his friend that it was happening just as he had described. But his friend understood him and said, "Don't worry." Time passed, and it was almost 12 o'clock, without noticing anything strange. The two went to sleep, hoping that what had happened yesterday was gone and wouldn't happen again, but Patrick was afraid because what happened to him yesterday was unforgettable. And while Patrick was sleeping, he heard the music playing again. He looked at his friend and found him asleep. He tried to wake him up, and when his friend woke up, Patrick asked him what was happening. He said, "Do you hear what I hear?" His friend replied, "Yes, it's the music." Patrick's friend started feeling a little afraid, but he pretended to be brave. He reassured Patrick until they noticed the curtains moving as if a gust of wind entered the room. They felt a cold breeze, and they both knew that their night wouldn't be fine. The music grew louder, and the sounds of dancing filled the air as if there was a concert. In a moment of fear, when everything calmed down and the music stopped, a strange figure appeared beside the bed. It wasn't clear, as if it was a semi-human creature, something that was neither an animal nor a human. Patrick and his friend froze in panic and fear. A pale voice began speaking angrily, saying, "The music. This is the music that was at my wedding." Patrick and his friend understood that this ghost or entity was angry with Patrick because he was displeased with the music. Suddenly, the terrifying figure disappeared, and Patrick started screaming as if something was attacking him. His friend couldn't do anything. He tried to approach, but he couldn't see the ghost again. In a desperate state, Patrick's friend called the police. He felt a sense of foreboding all around him. The police arrived, along with an ambulance, and Patrick was taken to the hospital. After questioning Patrick's friend, everyone was shocked by what had happened. 2 days later, Patrick woke up from his coma, but unfortunately, he suffered from a mental disorder and became somewhat insane. He was referred to a mental hospital. This is the story of Patrick as told by his friend, who spent a long time seeing psychiatrists in order to calm down and receive treatment after witnessing what he saw that night. The investigation revealed that the ghost was the woman whose life ended on her wedding night at 10 o'clock in the evening. That's why Patrick heard the music at that time. Eventually, the authorities sealed the building with red wax and closed it permanently. Anyone who passed by became terrified and couldn't even look at it. Conclusion: I hope you enjoyed the story, although it is sad and terrifying at the same time. If you liked the story, please subscribe to the channel and like the video to motivate us to bring you more strange horror stories.